"You don't belong on this committee." The sharp words cut through the packed hearing room, followed by the resounding crack of Maxine Waters' gavel. The camera lenses zoomed in on the powerful 83-year-old committee chair. Her face a mask of anger before panning to the stunned expressions of her fellow members. Across the aisle sat 41-year-old Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, the newest member of the House Financial Services Committee. Her face was a study in controlled emotion as the veteran lawmaker continued her public dressing down. "I've served on this committee for 20 years, Waters declared, her voice rising with indignation. "And never have I witnessed such disregard for protocol and respect from a junior member." All eyes in the C-SPAN cameras captured the electric tension as Crockett slowly reached into her briefcase, pulling out a slim folder. The young Congresswoman's hand was steady, her eyes locked on Waters as she removed a single document that would change everything. "But I'm chair," Crockett said, her voice calm, but carrying clearly through the suddenly silent chamber. "Before you continue, I believe you should see this." Waters took the paper, her anger visibly melted away, replaced by an expression of pure disbelief. The document in her hands was about to completely overturn this confrontation, setting the stage for one of the most unexpected political alliances in recent history. To truly understand the significance of this televised confrontation, we need to examine who these powerful women are and why their face-off matters so much to American politics. Maxine Waters, 83, has been a towering figure in American politics for decades. First elected to Congress in 1990, the California representative has built a reputation as a fearless, outspoken champion of progressive causes. Known affectionately as Auntie Maxine to her supporters, Waters currently chairs the influential House Financial Services Committee, wielding significant power over banking regulations and economic policy. Waters' political style has always been direct and confrontational. She made headlines during the Trump administration with her calls to publicly challenge administration officials, famously declaring, "If you see anybody from that cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get out and you create a crowd." Her uncompromising approach earned her both devoted followers and fierce critics. Throughout her long career, Waters has positioned herself as a kingmaker within the Democratic Party. Someone whose endorsement and support can make or break political careers. She's known for mentoring young politicians, particularly women of color, but also for expecting loyalty and deference to her experience and position. Jasmine Crockett, 41, represents a new generation of Democratic leadership. Elected to Congress in 2022 from Texas, Crockett arrived in Washington with impressive credentials. Before entering politics, she built a distinguished legal career as a civil rights attorney. Fighting against systemic racism in the criminal justice system and defending voting rights across the South, Crockett graduated from the University of Houston Law Center with honors and quickly established herself as a formidable courtroom presence. As a public defender, she handled hundreds of cases ranging from minor offenses to capital murder, developing a reputation for meticulous preparation and fearless advocacy for her clients. Her transition to politics began in the Texas state legislature, where she emerged as one of the most effective progressive voices despite being in the minority party. When she ran for Congress, Crockett campaigned on reforming the criminal justice system, protecting voting rights, and addressing economic inequality. Since arriving in Washington, Crockett has quickly distinguished herself with her incisive questioning in committee hearings, and her willingness to challenge both Republicans and senior Democrats when she believes they're wrong. Her legal background has given her a unique ability to dissect complex issues and expose contradictions in testimony. This confrontation between Waters and Crockett wasn't happening in isolation. It reflected deeper tensions within the Democratic Party about its future direction and leadership. The party has been experiencing a generational shift with younger, more progressive members increasingly challenging the authority and assumptions of the old guard. The House Financial Services Committee hearing was supposed to focus on proposed banking regulations aimed at preventing another financial crisis. Waters as committee chair had been leading the questioning of industry experts and government officials. But as the hearing progressed, she began directing increasingly pointed questions at committee members who she felt weren't showing sufficient support for her preferred regulatory approach. When Waters turned her attention to Crockett, the tone shifted from professional disagreement to something more personal. The committee chair began questioning not just Crockett's policy positions, but her understanding of financial regulations and even her qualifications to serve on the committee. The C-SPAN cameras captured the rising tension in the room as other committee members exchanged uncomfortable glances. Democratic Party leaders watching from their offices recognized they were witnessing something significant. A public challenge from one of the party's most powerful figures to one of its rising stars. The House Financial Services Committee hearing had been underway for nearly 3 hours. The chamber was filled with members of Congress, financial industry representatives, regulatory officials, and the press. C-SPAN cameras were rolling, broadcasting every moment of the proceedings to viewers across the country. Maxine Waters sat at the center of the Race Committee dais, her decades of experience evident in her commanding presence. As committee chair, she controlled the flow of the hearing, deciding who spoke and for how long. The power dynamic was clear to everyone in the room. "I'd like to turn now to the gentlewoman from Texas," Waters said, her voice carrying that distinctive authoritative tone that had become her trademark. "Miss Crockett, you've expressed some reservations about Sections 4 and 7 of the proposed regulations. I'm curious about your reasoning given your limited experience with financial oversight." The emphasis on limited experience wasn't subtle. Several committee members glanced up from their notes, recognizing the challenge in W's words. Crockett nodded slightly, maintaining her composure. Waters continued, "Before you were elected, your background was primarily in criminal defense. Correct. Not banking, not finance, not economic policy. Yet you seem quite confident in questioning provisions that those of us who lived through the 2008 crisis and crafted the Dodd-Frank Act understand are absolutely necessary." The room grew increasingly tense as Waters' critique became more pointed. "Perhaps you could explain to the committee exactly what qualifications you bring to this highly technical discussion, because frankly I'm concerned that some of our newer members don't appreciate the complexity of financial regulation and the consequences of getting it wrong." Throughout W's increasingly hostile questioning, Crockett remained composed, taking notes and occasionally exchanging whispered comments with her staff. The younger congresswoman's expression revealed little, but those sitting nearby could see her methodically organizing documents in a folder on the table before her. With all due respect, Chairwoman Waters, Crockett began her turn to speak, finally arriving. "I believe my concerns about Sections 4 and 7 are well-founded based on a careful reading of the proposed language. But before I address those specific points, I'd like to respond to your questions about my qualifications." Crockett's voice was steady and confident, showing no sign of intimidation despite Waters' stature. "You're correct that my background is primarily in law rather than finance. But I think you may be underestimating how relevant that experience is to our work here." "Miss Crockett, we have limited time," Waters interrupted, her voice sharp. "If you could address the specific provisions." "Madam Chair," Crockett responded firmly. "You specifically questioned my qualifications to serve on this committee. I believe I'm entitled to respond to that characterization before moving to policy details." A murmur ran through the chamber. Few members, particularly junior ones, directly challenged Waters in public settings. The committee chair's expression darkened slightly, but she nodded for Crockett to continue. "As a criminal defense attorney, I handled numerous cases involving financial crimes, securities fraud, and banking regulations," Crockett explained. "I've cross-examined financial experts, deposed bank executives, and developed a thorough understanding of how financial regulations work and how they fail in practice rather than just in theory." Crockett opened her folder and began laying out documents as she spoke. "Additionally, since joining this committee, I've spent countless hours consulting with economists, financial experts, and community banking advocates to ensure I fully understand both the technical aspects and real-world implications of our work." Waters leaned forward, her expression skeptical. "That's all well and good, Congresswoman, but there's a difference between consulting experts and having the experience to make these judgments yourself. Some of us have been working on these issues for decades. Experience is valuable, Madam Chair. I don't dispute that," Crockett replied. "But sometimes fresh eyes can identify problems that those who've been immersed in an issue for years might miss." The tension in the room was palpable, as Crockett continued. "In regarding Sections 4 and 7 specifically, my concerns aren't about the goals, which I fully support, but about the implementation mechanisms, which I believe contain loopholes that could undermine our shared objectives." Waters shook her head dismissively. "Miss Crockett, these provisions were carefully crafted based on lessons from multiple financial crises. The language has been reviewed by Treasury officials, the SEC, and the Federal Reserve. Are you suggesting you found problems that all these experts missed?" "Yes, Madam Chair. That's exactly what I'm suggesting," Crockett said, her voice remaining measured but firm, "and I can demonstrate precisely why." Crockett held up a document. "This is the current language of Section 4, Paragraph 3, which defines significant financial entities subject to enhanced oversight. The definition uses a threshold based on assets under management rather than risk exposure, which creates a loophole for certain types of derivative-heavy operations." Before Waters could respond, Crockett continued, "And I have here a memorandum from the Congressional Research Service confirming this concern. They note that at least 7 financial institutions that played significant roles in the 2008 crisis would fall outside this definition despite engaging in higher-risk activities." Waters' expression shifted slightly as Crockett methodically laid out her case. The younger Congresswoman wasn't just making vague objections. She had clearly done her homework and was presenting specific substantive concerns backed by respected nonpartisan analysis. Furthermore, Crockett continued, Section 7's reporting requirements contain a timing provision that would allow institutions to delay disclosure of certain transactions until after quarterly reports are filed, creating a potential window for concealing risk concentration. As Crockett spoke, other committee members were visibly reassessing the situation. What had begun as what appeared to be an attempt by Waters to put a junior member in her place was transforming into a substantive policy debate, one in which the younger Congresswoman was more than holding her own. Waters attempted to regain control of the narrative. Miss Crockett, while I appreciate your attention to detail, these regulations have been developed through years of careful consideration. Sometimes provisions that appear problematic to newcomers actually reflect necessary compromises or address complex interactions with existing regulations. I understand that, Madam Chair. Crockett responded respectfully but firmly, which is why I took the time to consult with former FDIC Chair Sheila Bair about these specific concerns. A ripple of surprise went through the room. Bair was widely respected for her prescience before the 2008 financial crisis and her effective management during it. Waters herself had frequently praised Bair's expertise. And what did Chair Bair have to say? Waters asked, her tone noticeably less dismissive. Crockett reached into her folder and pulled out another document. I have her written analysis here. Chair Bair agrees that these provisions, as currently written, could create regulatory blind spots similar to those that contributed to the last financial crisis. For the first time, Waters appeared genuinely taken aback. The confrontation had shifted from a challenge to a junior member's qualifications to a substantive debate about policy details, with a junior member bringing receipts from one of the most respected authorities in the field. The dynamic in the room was changing by the minute. Committee members who had been checking their phones or reviewing notes were now fully engaged, watching the exchange with rapt attention. Staffers were furiously taking notes, and journalists in the press section were typing rapidly, recognizing that this confrontation was becoming the story of the day. What had begun as an attempt by Waters to assert her authority was evolving into something none of the observers had expected. A moment that would redefine perceptions of both women and potentially reshape committee dynamics for the remainder of the session. The pivotal moment came when Congresswoman Crockett reached into her folder and pulled out a final document, one that would completely transform the confrontation and leave viewers across America stunned. Madam Chair, Crockett said, her voice calm but carrying clearly through the chamber. I want to address the underlying issue here. You've questioned my qualifications repeatedly, not just today, but in several private committee sessions over the past month. Waters began to interrupt, but Crockett continued with respectful determination. Please allow me to finish, as you've had considerable time to express your concerns about my capabilities. The room fell completely silent. Even veteran political reporters couldn't recall the last time someone had so directly challenged Waters' authority in her own committee. I believe in respecting experience and seniority, Crockett continued. But respect must be mutual. And more importantly, our primary responsibility is to the American people, not to committee hierarchies. Crockett held up the document in her hand. This is a draft memorandum dated 3 weeks ago from your own staff. Chairwoman Waters outlines the exact same concerns about sections 4 and 7 that I've raised today. Waters' expression shifted from surprise to something unreadable. As Crockett continued, your staff identified these same loopholes and recommended amendments nearly identical to what I've proposed. Yet when I raised these issues, you questioned my qualifications. Rather than addressing the substance of my concerns, the revelation landed like a thunderbolt in the hearing room. Committee members leaned forward, reporters frantically typed on their laptops, and all eyes moved between Crockett and Waters, waiting for the chair's response. For several seconds, an eternity in a congressional hearing, Waters said nothing, studying the younger congresswoman with an unreadable expression. The silence was broken only by the clicking of cameras as photographers captured what everyone recognized was a defining political moment. Then, remarkably, Maxine Waters did something few had ever seen in her long career. She smiled. Oh, Congresswoman Crockett, Waters said, her voice carrying a new note of respect. It appears you've done your homework more thoroughly than I anticipated. Waters turned to address the full committee. I've served in Congress for over 30 years. That time, I've seen many promising young representatives come and go. What separates those who make a difference from those who merely pass through is precisely the kind of preparation and conviction we've just witnessed. The committee members exchanged surprised glances as Waters continued. Miss Crockett is correct. My staff did identify concerns with these provisions. Concerns I was still evaluating, and she's right that I should have engaged with the substance of her objections rather than questioning her qualifications. Waters turned back to Crockett. You've demonstrated today that effective oversight doesn't come from seniority alone, but from diligence, preparation, and the courage to speak truth even when it's uncomfortable. Those are qualities we need more of in Congress. Then, in a move that stunned everyone in the chamber, Waters made an unprecedented proposal. I believe Congresswoman Crockett has raised valid concerns about sections 4 and 7. I would like to propose that she'll lead a working group to red draft these provisions, incorporating the protections we need while closing the loopholes she's identified. The committee room erupted in murmurs of surprise and approval. Greater than awe, veteran political. Greater than journalists in the press section were already drafting headlines about this unexpected turn of events. What had begun as a confrontation had transformed into a masterclass in political leadership from both women. Crockett, momentarily taken aback by this complete reversal, quickly regained her composure. Thank you, Madam Chair. I would be honored to lead that effort and will ensure all perspectives are considered as we strengthen these vital protections. Waters nodded with approval. That's exactly the approach we need. This committee's work is too important for political posturing or personal pride, including my own. The cameras captured the moment. Waters extended her hand to Crockett across the committee dais. A gesture of respect from one of the most powerful women in Congress to a rising star who had proven herself not through deference but through diligence and courage. As the two women shook hands, applause broke out in the committee room. It's unusual for a congressional hearing, but fitting for what everyone recognized was an extraordinary moment. Democratic and Republican members alike recognized they had witnessed something rare in modern politics. Confrontation that ended not with winners and losers, but with strengthened public service. Waters, ever the seasoned politician, had the last word before moving to the next agenda item. Let this be a lesson to everyone watching. In this committee, we value substance over seniority, facts over rank, the American people's interests over everything else. Congresswoman Crockett, I look forward to working with you to get this right. The C-SPAN cameras captured the genuine smiles on both women's faces. Waters reflecting the confidence of a leader secure enough to acknowledge when she's been outmaneuvered. And Crockett showing the satisfaction of earning respect rather than having it granted by default. In that moment, millions of Americans watching at home saw something all too rare in modern politics: authentic leadership, mutual respect despite disagreement, and a commitment to public service above personal ego. The aftermath of the Waters-Crockett exchange spread through Washington and across social media with extraordinary